Out in the unforgiving stretch of the Red Basin territory, between 1881 and 1882, justice usually came out of the barrel of a gun. And mercy was a rare thing few ever saw. What was about to unfold there wasn't just another tale of the frontier. It was a story of redemption. Two Apache sisters, torn from everything they had ever known, would come to learn that salvation sometimes rides in from the last place you'd expect. And a man, hunted not by others but by his own past, would make a choice that went against everything the world believed about him. This is a story about what family truly means, about the price of freedom, and how love can take root even in the harshest soil cruelty has to offer. Before we step any further into this journey, tell us where you're watching from. We like knowing who's riding along with us out here. The dust kicked up by 50 horses, and wagons hung thick in the air like a brown curtain over the makeshift auction grounds just outside Tombstone. October 3rd, 1881. A date burned into my memory like a brand on skin. I never meant to be there. Business had kept me in town longer than I planned, and curiosity got the better of me when I heard the noise. What I saw when I pushed through that crowd turned my blood cold. It wasn't cattle being sold. It was people. My name is Eli Boone. I'm 42 years old, and I've seen more cruelty than most men should in a lifetime. I served as a cavalry officer during the Apache Wars, fought battles that still come back to me in my sleep. Lost my wife, Clara, to consumption 3 years ago. Since then, I've been living alone out on my ranch in Red Canyon, trying to bury a past that refuses to stay buried. But nothing I'd lived through prepared me for what I witnessed that afternoon. The auctioneer, a slick, snake-tongued man named Silas Creed, stood atop a rough wooden platform selling human beings like livestock. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called out, his voice smooth as oil, "today we've got prime stock, strong backs, fit for ranch work, mining, or whatever your needs may be." The crowd was a mix of rough hands, miners, ranchers, and men whose intentions I didn't care to guess. They looked over the captives the way a man checks a horse. Teeth, muscle, posture, talking about their uses in voices that turned my stomach. Most of the prisoners were Apache, taken in raids or skirmishes. Men, women, even children, chained up and displayed like goods. That whole place should have been shut down. But Sheriff Grant Holloway was standing right there among them, not as law, but as a buyer. Then I saw them. 2 young Apache women stood near the end of the line, and something about them caught me right away. Sisters, no doubt about it. Same sharp cheekbones, same proud stance. The older one, maybe 26, stood slightly in front, shielding the younger like a wall. The girl behind her couldn't have been more than 19. What struck me wasn't fear. It was defiance. While the others looked broken or terrified, these two stood tall. In the older sister's eyes burned a quiet, controlled fury. In the younger's gaze, there was a kind of dignity no humiliation could strip away. "Well now, here we've got something special," Creed announced as he stepped closer to them. 2 Apache sisters, I'm told. Take a good look. Young, strong, and I guarantee they'll work hard with the right motivation. The crude laughter from the crowd made my fists tighten. "The older one's got spirit," Creed went on, keeping just out of her reach. "Might need a little breaking, but she'll be worth it. The younger one's more compliant, perfect for housework." He spoke about them like animals, and something inside me twisted hard. "We'll start the bidding at $50 for the pair." Hands shot up immediately. 60. 75. 100. I watched in growing horror as the price climbed. These weren't men looking for help on a ranch. You could see it in their eyes, something darker. The younger sister trembled just slightly, though she held her head high. The older one clenched her jaw, steady as stone. Then she turned. her eyes locked onto mine across the crowd. For a moment, everything else faded. There was no plea in her gaze. She was too proud to beg. What I saw instead hit me like a punch to the chest. It was a challenge, a question without words. Are you just going to stand there? Or are you going to do something? 150, shouted a thick-built man I recognized immediately, Buck Turner, a mine owner known for working men into the grave. 175, came another voice. Harlan Voss, a man infamous across the territory for how he treated women. The bidding kept climbing, and with every dollar called out, something inside me burned hotter. These were human beings, not cattle to be bought and sold. The younger sister started to tremble, just barely, though she kept her chin up. The older one stood rigid, jaw tight with quiet resolve. 250, Harlan Voss shouted, and the crowd fell into a hush. That's more than most folks see in 6 months. Silas Creed scanned the crowd, savoring the moment. Going once, going twice. I don't know what took hold of me right then. Maybe it was the memory of my own sister, gone since we were children. Maybe it was the weight of what I'd done in the Apache wars. Or maybe it was just the simple truth that what stood before me was wrong. Plain and undeniable. 300, I heard myself say. Every head turned my way. Creed's eyes lit up with greed, while Voss looked at me like he wanted me dead where I stood. Well now, Creed drawled with a grin. Eli Boone joins the bidding. 300 from the gentleman in the back. Voss's face flushed red with fury. 325. 350, I answered without hesitation. 400, he growled. The crowd buzzed, feeding on the tension. I looked back at the sisters. The older one was still watching me, studying me, trying to figure out what kind of man I was. 500, I said, clear and steady. A collective gasp rolled through the crowd. That was a fortune, more than many men earned in a year. Voss looked like he might push further, but even greed has its limits. Going once, going twice, sold. Creed slammed the gavel down. The Apache sisters go to Eli Boone for $500. As I forced my way through the crowd to settle the deal, I caught the whispers trailing behind me. What's Boone want with 2 Apache girls? Thought he was still grieving his wife. Man's got strange tastes, I reckon. I ignored them. Creed was practically rubbing his hands together when I stepped up. Congratulations, Mr. Boone, he said slickly. Fine choice. These 2 will serve you well. You'll see. I handed over the money without a word, then looked at what I had just bought. The words stuck in my throat. I had purchased 2 human beings. Even if it was to save them from something worse, it didn't make it right. They looked back at me, their expressions unreadable. The older sister had been unchained from the main line, but her wrists were still bound, same as the younger's. What are your names? I asked, in the little Apache I still remembered. The older one's eyes flickered with surprise, but she said nothing. I asked your names, I repeated in English. I'm Nayeli, she said at last, her voice steady despite everything. This is my sister Zuni. Well, Nayeli Zuni, I said quietly. We've got a long road ahead. As we walked toward my wagon, I could feel the weight of their eyes, and the murmurs from the crowd pressing in behind us. Sheriff Grant Holloway stepped up just as I helped them climb into the back. Boone, he said with a crooked smile. Hope you know what you're doing. Apache women can be unpredictable. I'll manage, I replied. Just remember, they're your property now. Anything they do falls on you. Property. The word crawled under my skin, but I gave a short nod and climbed up to the driver's seat. As we rode out of Tombstone, I caught Nayeli's reflection in the side mirror. She was whispering fast in Apache to her sister, trying to make sense of what was coming. I couldn't blame them for being afraid. We rode in silence for the first hour, just the creak of wheels and the steady rhythm of hooves. Finally, Zuni spoke, her English uncertain. Where you take us?" I turned back to look at them. These two young women whose lives I had just bought for $500, and made the decision that would change everything. "Home," I said simply. "I'm taking you home." "I'm taking you home." Confusion flickered in their eyes. But so did something else. Something fragile. The first hint of hope. They didn't understand what I meant yet, but they would soon enough. Red Canyon Ranch lay tucked inside a valley ringed by red stone cliffs that gave the land its name. It was a solid place. 2,000 acres of workable land, a sturdy house, and every outbuilding a working ranch could need. I had built it with Clara, dreaming of the family we'd raised there. Now it felt too big and far too empty for one man alone. As we rolled up toward the house, Marta Cruz, my housekeeper, stepped outside to see what all the noise was about. Marta, a widow well into her 50s, had worked alongside Clara and me for nearly 10 years. The moment she saw the two Apache women in the back of the wagon, she crossed herself. "Dear Lord, Mr. Boone, what have you done?" "Something I should have done a long time ago," I said as I climbed down. I walked around and held out my hand to help Niley down. She hesitated, just for a second, then took it. Her skin was warm despite the October air, and there was strength in her grip I couldn't ignore. Zuni was less guarded, letting me help her without resistance. They stood there in the yard, still bound, still unsure of what was expected of them. "Marta," I said, "could you prepare the guest rooms, and maybe find some proper clothes for our visitors?" "Visitors?" Her eyebrows lifted. "Yes," I said firmly. "Visitors." I turned back to Nayeli and Zuni, who were watching everything with growing confusion. "Let me make one thing clear," I said, meeting their eyes. "You're not my property. You're not slaves. What happened in Tombstone was wrong, and I'm sorry you had to go through it." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a knife. Both of them tensed instantly, but instead of threatening them, I cut the ropes. "You're free to leave whenever you want," I continued, as the bindings fell away. "But if you choose to stay, you'll be treated as part of this house, with respect, with dignity." Nayeli rubbed her wrists slowly, staring at me like she was trying to read something hidden beneath my skin. "Why?" she asked. "Why buy us? If you weren't going to use us? Why?" The answer came from somewhere deep, someplace I thought had gone cold years ago. "Because sometimes," I said quietly, "doing the right thing is the hardest thing a man can do." That night, I sat alone in my study, watching the red cliffs glow under the moonlight, wondering what kind of trouble I'd just invited into my life. I had brought two Apache women into my home, in a land where hatred for their people ran deep. I'd spent $500 I couldn't afford, with no guarantee they'd understand, or even accept what I'd done. But when I thought about the alternative, about what would have happened to Niley and Zuni if I'd walked away, I knew I'd made the only choice I could live with. The real question now was whether I could keep them safe, whether they would ever trust the man who had, in every legal sense, bought them like cattle. Only time would tell. But for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I had a purpose again. Something beyond just getting through the day. Chapter 2. I woke before sunrise, same as always. But the house felt different. There were other people under my roof now. For the first time since Clara died, I wasn't alone. And that thought sat strange in my chest. As I brewed coffee in the kitchen, I heard low voices upstairs, Marta speaking fast Spanish, mixed with broken Apache, and the sisters answering in soft murmurs. An hour later, Marta came down, her face tight with worry. "Mr. Boone, we need to talk." "What is it?" "Those girls. They've been through hell." She lowered her voice. "The younger one, Zuni, barely speaks. She won't say what was done to them before the auction. And Nayeli?" Marta shook her head slowly. "That one's like a cornered wolf. She doesn't trust anyone, least of all a white man." "How could I blame her?" I said quietly. "I can't." "But Mr. Boone, you need to understand what you've stepped into. They think all of this is a trap, that you're waiting for them to lower their guard so you can show your true intentions." The thought that they saw me as just another threat tightened something in my chest. "What can I do to prove otherwise?" "Time, patience, and prayer," Marta said softly. "Maybe a whole lot of prayer." I was out in the stable feeding the horses when Nayeli appeared in the doorway. She'd changed into one of the dresses Marta had found for her, but nothing about her felt softened. She still moved like a warrior, alert, coiled, ready for danger at any moment. "You speak some Apache," she said, getting straight to it. "A little. Picked it up while I served in the cavalry." "You fought against my people." It wasn't a question, and there was no use denying it. "Yes, I did." "How many did you kill?" Her bluntness caught me off guard, but she deserved honesty. "I don't know. It was war. Men died on both sides. Women. Children, too." I paused. "But I never killed children. Not once." She studied me in silence, as if weighing whether I was lying. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I'm telling you the truth, and because if I meant you harm, I wouldn't have cut your ropes last night." "Or maybe," she shot back, "you just prefer your victims obedient." The words hit hard, but I kept my voice steady. "Maybe. Or maybe you heard exactly what I said. A man trying to do what's right." "And what is right, Eli Boone?" she pressed. "What do you expect from us?" "Nothing," I answered. "I expect nothing, except that you treat me with the same respect I offer you." "Respect?" She let out a bitter laugh. "You bought us like horses, like cattle. Where's the respect in that?" "There isn't," I admitted. "What happened in Tombstone was wrong, and I'm sorry. I can't undo it. But I can try to make it right from here on out." Nayeli fell quiet for a moment, watching me brush down the horse. "My sister thinks you might be different," she said at last. "She's always been too trusting." "And you?" I asked. "I think white men know how to say pretty words when it suits them." "Fair enough," I said. "Then I guess I'll have to prove it with what I do, not what I say." "Where are you from?" I asked, shifting the conversation. "The Chiricahua Mountains. My people lived there for generations before—" She stopped. "Before what?" "Before men like you decided we didn't belong there anymore." In the days that followed, a fragile routine began to take shape. Marta helped them adjust, finding clothes, showing them around the house, easing them into a place that still felt foreign. Zuni, the younger one, slowly started to open up, especially around Marta, whose warmth seemed to calm her. Nayeli kept her distance, guarded, watchful, though sometimes, when she thought I wasn't looking, I'd catch her studying me, trying to figure me out, waiting for me to reveal whatever darkness she believed I was hiding. The first real test came on the 4th day. Sheriff Grant Holloway rode up to the house with 2 of his men. "Boone," he called as I stepped out onto the porch. "We need to talk." I could see Nayeli and Zuni watching from an upstairs window, I only hoped they couldn't feel the tension running through me. "What can I do for you, Sheriff?" "I've been hearing things," he said. "Trouble with your new acquisitions. Neighbor claims he saw one of them trying to steal chickens." A lie, and we both knew it. My nearest neighbor lived over 5 miles away, and neither of those girls had set foot off my land. "That's strange," I said evenly, "considering they haven't left my property." "You calling me a liar, Boone?" "I'm saying your information's wrong." Holloway's eyes narrowed. "I'm going to have to search your ranch. Make sure you're keeping those savages under control." "You got a warrant?" "Don't need one when it comes to runaway property." "They're not runaways," I said sharply. "They're my guests." "Guests?" Holloway laughed. "That what you're calling them now?" Before I could answer, Nayeli stepped onto the porch beside me. I hadn't even heard her approach. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her English clear and steady. Holloway looked her over with open contempt. "Well now, the savage speaks English. How civilized." I felt Nayeli tense beside me, but her voice stayed calm. "I actually speak 3 languages," she said. "English, Spanish, and Apache." "How many do you speak, Sheriff?" Grant Holloway's face hardened instantly. "Watch your tongue, girl," he snapped, "or I'll have you right back on that auction block." "That's enough." I stepped forward, putting myself between them. "Say what you came to say, or get off my land." "I came to make sure the peace is kept," Holloway said coldly. "Apache have been hitting ranches, stealing cattle, killing good Christian folk. How do I know these 2 ain't scouting for their warriors?" "Because they've been here under my watch since Tuesday," I replied, "unless you're accusing me of helping raiders." The accusation hung in the air between us. Holloway was crooked, but not foolish enough to throw that kind of claim without proof against a man with a reputation. "Keep them under control, Boone," he muttered. "Anything happens, it's on you." He spat in the dirt, turned his horse, and rode off with Holloway's men trailing behind him. After they were gone, Nayeli and I stood in silence on the porch for a long while. "Thank you," she said at last. "For what?" "For not handing us over. It would have been easier for you." "I don't do things because they're easy." She looked at me then, and for the first time, there was something different in her eyes. Not trust, not yet, but something close to it. "Why did you really buy us, Eli Boone?" she asked. "And don't tell me it was just to do the right thing. Men don't spend $500 on strangers for nothing." I'd been asking myself that same question for days. Now, I finally had an answer. 3 years ago, I said slowly, I lost everything that mattered. My wife, the child we were expecting, my reason to keep going. Since then, I've been walking around like a dead man. I paused, the words heavy in my chest. When I saw you up on that platform, saw how you stood your ground no matter what they did to you, it reminded me of something I thought I'd lost for good. What? Hope, I said. The idea that what's broken can be mended, that what's lost might still be found again. That afternoon, Zuni sat beside me on the porch while Nayeli helped Marta with supper inside. The younger sister had begun to ease around me, just a little, though she still spoke softly, and only when asked. My sister doesn't trust easily, Zuni said gently. I've noticed. She has reasons. The men who captured us, they were not kind. The simplicity of her words carried a weight that made my hands clench. I'm sorry for what you went through. Nayeli protected me, she said. She always does. But sometimes, what we do to survive, it changes us. I looked at her. This girl barely out of childhood, speaking with the quiet understanding of someone who had seen far too much. What do you want now, Zuni? I asked. Where do you want to go? I don't know, she answered honestly. Our people are scattered. Our village is gone. Some went to the reservation. Others fled to Mexico. We have no family left, just each other. Then stay, I said. Both of you. Stay here as long as you need. Why? She asked, studying me. What do you gain from that? It was a fair question, one I was still learning how to answer. Maybe I gain a chance to be a better man, I said. Maybe a chance to make up for some of the harm I've done. She gave a faint, almost shy smile. Or maybe, she added, we all gain a family. The word hit harder than I expected. Family. Something I had stopped believing in. That night, lying in bed, I kept thinking about what she'd said. Was it possible? Could we really become something like a family, after everything that stood between us? The idea was as beautiful as it was frightening. From across the hall, I could hear Nayeli and Zuni speaking softly in Apache. I didn't understand the words, but the sound of voices in my house. It settled something deep inside me. For the first time since Clara died, I fell asleep feeling like I wasn't entirely alone. Still, I knew the real trials hadn't come yet. Grant Holloway wouldn't be the last man to stir trouble over me taking those sisters in. And I still had to prove to Nayeli that I deserved the trust she gave so sparingly. The question was whether I'd be strong enough to protect them when the moment came, because something deep in my gut told me it was coming, and sooner than any of us were ready for. 2 weeks later, that moment rode in at dawn. Silas Creed showed up at my ranch with 3 armed men just after sunrise. I was out in the barn when Marta came running, her face pale with fear. Mr. Boone, that slave trader is here, and he's brought armed men. My blood went cold. I grabbed my rifle and headed for the house. As I stepped into the yard, I saw Nayeli and Zuni watching from an upstairs window. "Stay inside," I shouted. "No matter what happens, don't come out." Creed sat tall in the saddle in the middle of the yard, smiling like a snake that already knew how this would end. The men with him looked like hired killers, hard eyes, hands never far from their guns. "Boone," Creed called out, his tone almost cheerful. "Hope you don't mind the early visit. Say what you came to say and get off my land." Now, no need for hostility," he said smoothly. "I'm here on business. Seems there's been a complaint about your recent purchase." "What kind of complaint?" "Well, it appears those Apache girls you bought actually belong to someone else. A prior claim, you might say." I kept my rifle ready, though I didn't raise it yet. "That's not possible. You sold them to me." "Ah, but here's the interesting part," Creed said with a grin. "Turns out I never had the legal right to sell them in the first place. They were captured by a bounty hunter, Buck Turner, who was transporting them to a military prison. They escaped along the way, and I simply assumed they were unclaimed. It was a lie. We both knew it. But it was the kind of lie that could get a man hanged if the right people believed it. Turner here has come to reclaim his property," Creed added, gesturing to one of the men beside him. Buck Turner was big, rough, with eyes that looked like they'd never known mercy. "Those girls cost me time and money to track down," Turner growled. "I want them back, and I want compensation." "How much?" I asked, buying time. "Let's say $1,000, plus the return of my property." It was nothing but extortion. Plain and simple. They wanted the sisters back, likely to sell them again, and squeeze more money out of me while they were at it. "And if I refuse?" Creed sighed, putting on a show of disappointment. "Well, then it becomes theft of military prisoners. Sheriff Holloway would have no choice but to arrest you. Real shame." Right then, Nayeli stepped onto the porch behind me. I had told her to stay inside, but she was never one to follow orders. "Are you lying?" she asked calmly. "We were never military prisoners." Turner's face twisted, caught somewhere between anger and something uglier. "Shut your mouth, girl," he snapped, "before I shut it for you." "Try it," Nayeli said, her hand moving to the knife at her belt, the one I had given her for protection. The air turned sharp. Dangerous. 4 armed men in front of me, and 2 innocent women behind me. "Here's my counteroffer," I said evenly. "You've got 10 seconds to get off my land, before I start shooting." Creed laughed out loud. "You're outnumbered, Boone. Be reasonable." 5 seconds. "You don't stand a chance against all of us." I raised my rifle and aimed it straight at Creed's chest. "Try me." For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then, hoofbeats. Fast. Closing in, the sound cut through the silence like thunder. Doc Hayes rode into the yard, the town doctor himself, flanked by 2 men I recognized immediately. Federal riders. "Gentlemen," Doc Hayes called out, calm but firm as he reined in his horse. "Hope I'm not interrupting anything important," Doc Hayes said as he rode in. Silas Creed's confidence cracked, just for a second, but I saw it. Federal riders didn't answer to local corruption, not to men like Grant Holloway. "Doc," I said, never lowering my rifle. "You're right on time, Mr. Creed," one of the federal riders said, his voice cold and official. "We've been looking for you." "For what?" Creed asked, though the answer was already written across his face. "Illegal slave trafficking, kidnapping, operating unauthorized auctions under federal law." The words fell like hammer blows. "You're under arrest." When they dragged Creed and his men away in irons, the tension finally broke, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Doc Hayes swung down from his horse and walked up to the porch. "Sorry it took so long," he said quietly. "Had to ride all the way to Tucson to get federal authority. Local law didn't want any part of this." "How'd you know?" I asked. "Marta sent word," he said with a faint smile. "You've got yourself a sharp woman there." I glanced toward the doorway, where Marta stood watching, arms folded, satisfaction written all over her face. "Sent my nephew to fetch help," she said. "Men like that carry evil in their bones." After the federal riders rode off with their prisoners, Doc Hayes stayed for coffee. At my request, he examined both sisters. What he found, old injuries, hidden scars, told a story neither of them had spoken aloud. "They're strong," he told me in private. "But they've been through hell, especially the younger one." "What do you mean?" His expression hardened. "Use your imagination, Boone, and be patient. Trust doesn't come easy after what they've endured." That evening, Nayeli found me sitting on the porch, watching the red cliffs fade into dusk. She lowered herself beside me without a word. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For standing up to those men, for risking your life for us." She shook her head. "Not everyone would have done that." "Anyone would have." "No," she said firmly. "Most white men would have handed us over to avoid trouble." We sat there in silence for a while, watching the stars begin to scatter across the sky. "Can I ask you something?" she said at last. "Go ahead." "When you were a soldier, fighting my people, did you ever question if it was right?" It was a hard question. One I'd asked myself more times than I cared to count. Toward the end, yeah, I admitted. I started to see we weren't fighting savages. We were fighting people trying to protect their homes, their families, people not so different from us. What changed your mind? I met an Apache warrior during a ceasefire. His name was Taza, spoke perfect English, had studied at a mission. We spent hours talking about our families, about what we hoped for in the future. I paused, the memory still sharp. I realized he wasn't some monster, just a man defending what he loved. What happened to him? He died in the next battle, I said quietly. One of my men shot him while he was trying to surrender. Nayeli went still, the weight of it settling between us. So that's why you saved us, she said after a long silence. Because of your past? In part, I admitted, but also because it was the right thing to do, and because I hesitated once before. I won't make that mistake again. You reminded me, I added, that there's still something worth protecting in this world. The next morning, an unexpected visitor rode in. Kiona. An Apache leader, calm, dignified, carrying himself with quiet authority, entered the yard alone, unarmed. The moment Nayeli and Zuni saw him, they ran to him, tears breaking loose. "Uncle!" Zuni cried, throwing her arms around him. He spoke to them in Apache for several minutes, his voice low and steady. Then he turned to me, his gaze sharp and searching. "You are the white man who bought my nieces." "Yes," I said, "but I freed them the moment I could." "I've heard that," Kiona replied. "Why?" "Because no human being should belong to another." He studied me for a long moment. "You fought against my people?" "I did, and I regret it. And yet now you protect Apache women, risking your own life. That's what any decent man would do." Kiona shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "That is what a good man does. There is a difference." After speaking with his nieces for nearly an hour, he returned to me. "They wish to stay with you," he said. "Both of them say you have given them something they thought was gone forever." "What?" He paused. "Hope," he said. "And a home." Then he looked me straight in the eye. "You have my blessing, Eli Boone. But remember this," Kiona said, his voice steady but edged with warning. "If you ever betray their trust, if you ever harm them, I will come for you myself." "I understand." He gave a small nod. "Good. Then welcome to the family." As Kiona rode off, I stood there in the yard with Nayeli and Zuni at my side, feeling something I hadn't known in years. Belonging. "So, what now?" I asked. Nayeli smiled, soft, real, the first true smile I'd ever seen from her. "Now we build something together," she said. "A real life, a real family." Zuni slipped her hand into mine and gave it a gentle squeeze. "Home," she said simply, and for the first time since Clara died, I truly felt like I had come back to one. Chapter 4. Spring came early to Red Canyon that year, carrying with it a sense of renewal that seemed to touch every inch of the land. 3 months had passed since the sisters came into my life, and the change was nothing short of remarkable. The house that had felt like a tomb for 3 long years now echoed with laughter, voices, and the quiet warmth of something alive again. Zuni blossomed like a desert flower after rain. Her English improved fast, and she took over much of the cooking, blending Apache traditions into meals that were better than anything I'd ever tasted. She sang while she worked, soft traditional songs that filled the house with something close to peace. Nayeli, on the other hand, had a gift with horses and cattle. The way she understood animals, read them, calmed them, it was something I'd never seen before. She could settle a spooked horse with nothing but a touch, spot a sick calf from a distance most men would miss. But more than that, the walls she'd built around her heart were starting to come down. Then came the morning of March 15th. The day everything changed. I was out in the corral working with a young colt when Marta came running from the house, her face lit with something I hadn't seen before. Excitement. "Mr. Boone, you need to come. There's news." Inside, I found Nayeli and Zuni standing in the kitchen, both of them holding a telegram. Both of them crying. For a second, my heart dropped. What happened? It's not bad, Nayeli said quickly, wiping her tears. It's better than anything we ever imagined. Zuni stepped forward and handed me the paper, her hands trembling. It was from a lawyer in Washington, D.C., Edgar Whitmore. Land claim for Nayeli and Zuni Nightwind, recognized by federal court. Compensation awarded for seized Apache lands. Amount, $35,000. Contact immediately. I read it twice, hardly believing it. 35,000, I muttered. That's a fortune. Our grandfather filed the claim 20 years ago, Nayeli explained. Before he died, he told us about it, but we never thought it would be approved. The government almost never honors Apache claims, Zuni added, her voice filled with disbelief. But this time, they did. We're rich, Eli. Truly rich. The weight of that hit me like a lightning strike. With that kind of money, they could go anywhere, do anything, buy land, build a life, live without ever depending on anyone again. They could leave me, and the thought of that cut deeper than I expected. Over these past months, they had become more than I ever planned, more than I was willing to admit. They had become my family. And losing them would feel like losing everything all over again. That's wonderful news, I said, forcing the words out, trying to hide what I felt. You can start fresh anywhere you want. Nayeli looked at me, her eyes sharp and searching. What makes you think we want to go anywhere else? With that kind of money, you could have everything, I said. A house in San Francisco? Travel? Anything you want. And leave you? Zuni asked quietly. Leave our home? This isn't really your home, I said. You ended up here by chance. No, Nayeli said firmly, stepping forward. We didn't end up here by accident. Her voice didn't waver. We came here because someone cared enough to save us when no one else would, because someone gave us kindness when the world only showed us cruelty. She held my gaze. But now you have choices, I said. Real choices. You're right, Nayeli said, rising to her feet. Yes, we have choices. She took a step closer, her voice steady, unshaken. And I choose to stay here, with the man I love. The words struck like thunder. Love. She had said she loved me. Nayeli, I whispered, my voice barely holding. I love you, Eli Boone, she said. I tried to deny it, tried to convince myself it was just gratitude, or dependence. But it's not. Her eyes didn't waver. I love your kindness, your strength, that wounded heart of yours that still finds room for others. I love the way you treat my sister like she's the most valuable thing in this world. I love the man you've become. Zuni stood beside her, smiling through tears. And I love having a brother, she said softly. Someone who protects us, who makes us feel safe. Why would we ever leave that? My chest tightened, my own eyes burning. Are you sure? I asked. Truly sure? Because if you stay, if we build this life together, I don't think I could survive losing you again. Then don't lose us, Nayeli said, stepping closer. She reached for my hand. Marry me, Eli Boone. Let's make this family real. I had dreamed of something like that once, but never believed it could be mine again. After everything I've done? I asked. Everything I've been? Because of everything you've been, she answered. Your past made you the man who could save us. Your pain taught you how to understand ours. I looked at the two women who had brought light back into a life I thought was already buried, and made the easiest decision of my life. Yes, I said, pulling Nayeli into my arms. Yes, I'll marry you. And if you want to stay here, then stay. For as long as you wish. Zuni let out a small laugh, a spark of mischief in her eyes. Actually, she said, we have a better idea. I raised a brow. And what's that? We use the money, she said, to expand the ranch, buy more land, build something bigger, something that doesn't just take care of us, but helps others too. How? Nayeli's eyes lit up. A place for Apache people with nowhere else to go. A working ranch that offers both shelter and purpose. A bridge between our worlds. The vision she painted was bold, beautiful, and dangerous. People won't like that, I said quietly. Then we'll change their minds, Zuni replied with quiet certainty. One person at a time, just like you changed ours. 6 months later, on a cool October morning, Nayeli and I were married in the valley beneath the Red Cliffs. Kiona led the ceremony in the Apache way, while Doc Hayes handled the legal formalities. The gathering was small, but it meant something. Marta and the Cruz family were there. A handful of neighboring ranchers who had learned to respect what we had built, and several Apache families, Nayeli's band, who now lived and worked alongside us on the growing ranch. As Nayeli walked toward me in her white dress, Zuni at her side as both sister and witness, I couldn't help but feel the weight of everything that had changed. A year ago, I was a bitter, broken man, just waiting for the end. Now I stood surrounded by love, purpose, and something I never thought I'd have again. Family. Do you take this woman as your wife? Doc Hayes asked. I do, I said, meeting Nayeli's dark, steady gaze. And do you take this man as your husband, to love and honor him according to the traditions of both your people? I do, Nayeli answered, her voice clear and unwavering. When we kissed, sealing our vows, the cheers rose around us, and I felt Zuni's hand grip my arm tightly. That was what family felt like. That was what home felt like. Later that night, under a sky full of stars, as the celebration carried on, Kiona pulled me aside. You have given my nieces something of great value, he said quietly. Not just safety or comfort, Kiona continued, his voice calm but firm, but the chance to heal and to grow. They've given me the same, I replied quietly. He studied me for a moment, then said, The road ahead won't be easy. There will be those who stand against what you're building here. I know, I said, but we'll face it together. A slow smile crossed the old man's face. Yes, he said. Together. That is the Apache way. And now, it is your way too. As the celebration carried on behind us, I stood beside my wife and my sister, looking out over the land we were shaping with our own hands. It had all begun with a single moment, one choice, one act of compassion in a world that too often chose cruelty instead. And now, we were building something meant to last, a place where love stood stronger than hate, where different people could live side by side, work side by side, and find something worth holding on to. This wasn't the life I had imagined the day I first rode into Tombstone 7 months ago. It was better. It was a life worth living, worth protecting, worth passing down to whatever came next. And it had all started with 3 simple words. I'll take you home. Sometimes the most important journeys begin with a single act of faith. Sometimes family isn't something you're born into. It's something you choose. And sometimes the greatest victories don't come from conquering others, but from opening your heart and letting others change you. If this story stayed with you, don't forget to leave a like, share your thoughts, and tell us where you're watching from. Have you ever taken a risk to help a stranger, not knowing how it would end? Tell us your story below, and ride with us for more tales of the frontier, where courage and compassion still carve their mark into the dust.